The winter wind howled through the streets of Chicago, sending icy fingers down the spines of hurried pedestrians. It was a Friday evening, and the piano room was starting to fill with its usual crowd: couples on dates, friends meeting after work, and music lovers seeking refuge from the ordinary. The soft glow of vintage lamps cast warm circles of light across the polished wooden floors and red velvet booths. Jazz played softly in the background as waiters moved between tables with trays of cocktails balanced expertly on their fingertips. Angie, the hostess with bright copper hair piled high on her head, glanced up from her reservation book when the front door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. She prepared her welcoming smile but paused when she saw who had entered. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, small and hunched against the cold. Her white hair was neatly combed but peeked out from under a faded blue knit hat that had seen better days. She wore layers of mismatched clothes, a flowered dress visible beneath a man's cardigan sweater, topped with a worn beige overcoat. Her hands, spotted with age and slightly swollen at the knuckles, clutched a plastic shopping bag and a frayed purse. Angie's smile softened from professional to concerned. This wasn't their usual clientele, and she immediately assumed the old woman had wandered in seeking warmth from the bitter night. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Angie asked gently, stepping out from behind her podium. The old woman didn't seem to hear. Her watery blue eyes had fixed on something across the room: the gleaming black grand piano that sat on the small stage in the corner. The instrument waited silently for the night's performer, its lid propped open like a great black wing. "Ma'am?" Angie tried again, moving closer. "Are you looking for somewhere to warm up? There's a shelter about 3 blocks from here. I could call someone to help you get there." The old woman's gaze slowly shifted from the piano to Angie's face. Her eyes, despite their age, held a surprising clarity. "I used to play," she said, her voice quiet but steady. She nodded toward the piano. "Many years ago." Something in her tone made Angie pause. There was dignity there, and a hint of something else. Pride, perhaps, or longing. The kitchen doors swung open, and Tom, the young manager, emerged carrying a stack of fresh menus. He noticed Angie speaking with the elderly visitor and came over, curiosity and concern mingling on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice low. "This lady just came in. I think she might be looking for shelter," Angie explained, keeping her voice gentle but audible enough for the old woman to hear. "I'm not lost," the woman said firmly. She straightened her bent back as much as she could, standing perhaps an inch taller. "I saw your piano from outside. I wanted to look at it." Tom and Angie exchanged glances. The piano room was known for its upscale atmosphere and the talented musicians who performed there. Weekend reservations were booked weeks in advance. "Do you have family nearby, ma'am?" Tom asked. "Someone we can call?" The old woman shook her head. "My name is Eleanor Wilson. I'm 96 years old and I've been taking care of myself for a very long time." She didn't say it unkindly, but there was a finality to her words that commanded respect. A couple entered behind Eleanor, stamping snow from their boots and laughing together. They hesitated, unsure how to navigate around the small gathering at the entrance. Tom made a quick decision. "Why don't you come sit down for a few minutes, Ms. Wilson? Warm up a bit. Angie can bring you some hot tea while we figure things out." A flicker of relief crossed Eleanor's face, though she tried to hide it. "That's very kind. Thank you." Tom guided her to a small table near the back, not too close to other guests but with a clear view of the piano. Eleanor moved slowly, her steps careful but determined. She kept her shopping bag close, placing it carefully under her chair after she sat down. "Earl Grey. If you have it," she told Angie. "No sugar, just a slice of lemon." As Angie went to fetch the tea, Tom lingered, his curiosity piqued. "You mentioned you used to play." Eleanor's hands rested on the table, and Tom noticed how the fingers, despite their arthritis, seemed to arrange themselves naturally as if hovering over invisible keys. "I studied at Juilliard," she said simply. "Before the war." Tom's eyebrows rose. Juilliard was one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. Before he could ask more, Angie returned with the tea, setting it carefully in front of Eleanor. "Our pianist should be here soon," Tom said. "Feel free to enjoy the music while you warm up." Eleanor thanked him with a nod and wrapped her gnarled fingers around the warm cup. As Tom walked away, he couldn't help but wonder about her story. Juilliard to homelessness was quite a journey, The recorded jazz playing through the speakers changed to a Thelonious Monk piece, complex and playful. Tom noticed how Eleanor's head tilted slightly, her eyes closing as she listened. Her right hand, resting on the table, began to move almost imperceptibly, fingers pressing invisible keys in perfect time with the music. Across the room, the door opened again, letting in another gust of cold air and a harried-looking waitress. "Tom," she called, hurrying over to where he stood at the bar checking inventory. "Just got a call from Raj. He's got that flu that's going around, says he can barely sit up, let alone perform tonight." Tom ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Raj was their Friday night pianist, and the room was already half full of people who had come specifically to hear him play. "Did you call any of our backup musicians?" he asked. She nodded. "Everyone's either booked or down with the same bug. It's making the rounds at the music school." Tom glanced around the room, mental gears turning. They could increase the volume on the recorded music, but it wouldn't be the same. The piano room was known for live performances. It was right there in the name. His eyes landed on Eleanor, who was still sitting quietly with her tea, eyes closed, fingers dancing silently along with Monk's Round Midnight. It was crazy. He couldn't possibly, and yet Tom approached Eleanor's table again. She opened her eyes as he neared, those clear blue eyes curious. "Ms. Wilson," he began, trying to sound casual, "you mentioned you studied at Juilliard." Eleanor nodded. "Piano performance. I graduated in 1950. Our pianist called in sick," Tom said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. "We're in a bit of a bind. I don't suppose you know any songs? Just to fill in until we figure something out?" For a moment, Eleanor didn't respond. Then a subtle change came over her face, a straightening of her shoulders, a lifting of her chin. The change was so profound that Tom suddenly saw past the worn clothes and the signs of homelessness to something else entirely. Dignity, pride, and a lifetime of music. "I know a few," she said softly. Then, with a small smile that transformed her face, "I might be a bit rusty." Tom's professional concern warred with his curiosity. "If you'd like to try, we'd be grateful. Just until we can find a replacement." Eleanor considered this for a long moment, her eyes drifting back to the piano. "I haven't played on a proper grand in quite some time." "No pressure," Tom assured her. "If it doesn't work out, we understand." Eleanor finished her tea with deliberate slowness, then carefully set down the cup. "I'll need someone to help me up the step to the stage." Tom nodded, offering his arm. The room had grown busier now, with most tables filled. A few patrons glanced curiously as Tom escorted the elderly woman toward the piano, her plastic shopping bag still clutched firmly in one hand. When they reached the small stage, Tom helped Eleanor up the single step, then pulled out the piano bench for her. She sat down with care, placing her shopping bag beside the bench. "Would you like me to take your coat?" Tom asked. Eleanor shook her head. "I'll keep it, thank you. My bones get cold easily these days." She adjusted her position on the bench, then gently set her hands in her lap, staring at the keys before her. The moment stretched, and Tom began to worry he'd made a terrible mistake. Perhaps she was confused, or it had been too many years since she'd played. Just as he was about to suggest they forget the whole thing, Eleanor's hands rose and hovered over the keys. Her fingers, though bent with arthritis, spread with surprising grace. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a gentleness that belied the strength hiding in those aged hands, Eleanor pressed the first key. A single, perfect note rang out through the piano room, hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Eleanor Wilson, homeless at 96, closed her eyes and began to play. The first notes that flowed from Eleanor's fingers were tentative, like someone testing the temperature of water before diving in. A simple melody, played with care. Some patrons glanced toward the piano with mild interest, then returned to their conversations, assuming she was just warming up the instrument for the real performer. But then something changed. Eleanor's back straightened slightly. Her shoulders relaxed, and her hands began to move with growing confidence. The melody deepened, complexity building upon itself as she eased into Debussy's Clair de Lune. The piece started softly, like moonlight touching the surface of a lake, then grew with gentle intensity. At a nearby table, a woman paused mid-sentence, wineglass halfway to her lips. Her companion turned to look at the piano, eyebrows lifting in surprise. Throughout the room, conversations gradually died down as more people became aware of what was happening. Within minutes, the piano room had fallen into a hushed silence, all eyes drawn to the small elderly woman at the grand piano. Eleanor played with her eyes closed, lost in the music. Her fingers, despite their age and stiffness, found each key with perfect precision. When she reached the climax of the piece, her whole body seemed to transform, no longer a frail, homeless woman, but a true musician channeling the composer's intentions through her very being. Tom stood transfixed near the bar, barely breathing. This was not what he had expected. This was not someone who knew a few songs. This was mastery. As the final notes of Clair de Lune faded into silence, there was a moment when no one in the room moved. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted into applause. Eleanor's eyes opened, seeming surprised to find herself in a room full of people. A slight flush colored her pale cheeks. Instead of acknowledging the applause, she seamlessly transitioned into her next piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The audience settled back and chanted all over again. Angie sidled up to Tom, her eyes wide. "Who is she?" she whispered. "I have no idea," Tom replied, shaking his head in wonder. "But I'm going to find out." As Eleanor continued to play, weaving between classical pieces and occasionally surprising the audience with jazz standards that she transformed with her classical training, the word spread. Staff members from the kitchen peeked through the doors. People walking past the large windows of the piano room stopped to look inside, drawn by the music. Some even came in, happy to stand at the back when they discovered all tables were filled. During a brief pause between songs, Tom approached the piano with a glass of water. Eleanor accepted it with a grateful nod, her hands trembling slightly from exertion. "You're amazing," Tom said quietly. "The crowd loves you. Would you be willing to play for another hour? We'll pay you, of course." Eleanor took a sip of water. "I haven't played this long in years," she admitted. "My fingers will be sore tomorrow." She glanced around at the rapt faces watching her. "But yes, I'll continue, though I might need more tea." Tom nodded eagerly. "Anything you want." As he turned to head back to the bar, Eleanor called after him. "And perhaps a small sandwich?" "I haven't eaten since morning." The request, so humble after such a magnificent performance, struck Tom's heart. He immediately ordered a full meal to be prepared for her, to be ready when she decided to take a break. Eleanor began again, this time with Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, adapting the orchestral parts for solo piano with remarkable skill. A few tables away, an older gentleman in an expensive suit leaned toward his companion. "I swear I've heard her play before," he said, squinting toward the piano, "many years ago." As Eleanor played on, snippets of conversation around the room turned to questions about her identity. Who was this woman? Where had she come from? How did someone with such extraordinary talent end up homeless? During a brief interlude while Eleanor ate her dinner at the piano bench, refusing to leave the instrument even for a meal, Tom sat beside her, curiosity finally getting the better of him. "Ms. Wilson, if you don't mind me asking, you mentioned Juilliard. Were you a professional pianist?" Eleanor dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, taking her time before answering. Her eyes drifted over the keys as if seeing memories there. "I was on that path," she said finally. "I gave a few notable recitals in New York after graduation. Critics said I had promise." She smiled faintly at the memory. But life had other plans. She took another bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. Tom waited, sensing there was more to the story. "I met Harold in 1951, she continued. "He was a factory worker with the most beautiful singing voice I'd ever heard. Not trained, but pure." Her eyes took on a faraway look. "We married 6 months later. His mother fell ill and we moved to Chicago to care for her." "Did you continue performing here?" Eleanor shook her head. "I taught piano lessons from our home while raising our children. 4 of them." Pride crept into her voice. "All grown now with children of their own." Tom frowned, confused. "But if you have family, why am I homeless?" Eleanor finished his unspoken question. She set down her fork with deliberate care.
"Harold died 15 years ago. Cancer. The medical bills took most of our savings."
"I managed for a while, but then came my own health problems." She gestured to her hip. "Replacement surgery. More bills. I sold the house to pay them." "Your children couldn't help?" Tom asked gently. A shadow crossed Eleanor's face. "My 2 sons died young. one in Vietnam, one from a heart condition he inherited from his father. My oldest daughter lives in Australia. We speak on birthdays. And Lily, her voice softened. Lily has schizophrenia. She's in a good facility now, but her care takes what little I can contribute from my social security. She straightened her shoulders. I stayed with friends until I felt I had imposed too long. The shelters aren't so bad, and the public library is warm during the day. I play sometimes on the piano at the train station when my hands allow it. Tom struggled to find words. The dignity with which she spoke of her circumstances humbled him. Before he could respond, a young woman approached the piano, clutching her phone. "Excuse me," she said, addressing Eleanor with obvious admiration. "I hope you don't mind, but I recorded some of your playing and posted it on my social media. People are loving it. Would it be okay if I shared your name?" Eleanor blinked, surprised. "Well, I suppose so." "Eleanor Wilson, are you playing here again tomorrow? People are asking." Eleanor looked to Tom, a question in her eyes. "Absolutely," Tom said without hesitation. "Ms. Wilson will be our featured pianist this weekend." He turned to her. "If that's agreeable to you?" Eleanor's hands resting in her lap twitched slightly, as if already anticipating their return to the keys. "Yes," she said simply. "That would be agreeable." As the young woman thanked them and walked away, already typing on her phone, Tom noticed the older gentleman in the expensive suit approaching. The man moved with the confident air of someone used to being listened to. "Excuse the interruption," he said, his voice carrying the polished tone of education and privilege. "I knew I recognized your playing, Ms. Wilson. You gave a recital at Carnegie Hall in 1950. Bach's Goldberg Variations. I was a music student then. Your interpretation was—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Transcendent." Eleanor looked up at him, genuine surprise on her face. "You remember that?" "Some performances stay with you forever," he said. "I followed your career for a while. Then you seemed to disappear from the concert circuit. I always wondered why." "Life," Eleanor said simply. "Life happened." The man nodded as if this explained everything. "I'm Patrick Donovan. I serve on the board of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card, which he handed to Tom. "Please call my office on Monday. I believe we can arrange something more suitable for a musician of Ms. Wilson's caliber." After he walked away, Eleanor stared down at her empty plate. "I should get back to the shelter before they lock the doors for the night." Tom shook his head firmly. "No, Ms. Wilson, not tonight. The piano room has an arrangement with the hotel next door for our guest musicians. You'll stay there tonight and we'll figure everything else out tomorrow." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears she seemed determined not to shed. "You are very kind," she whispered. "It's not kindness," Tom replied honestly. "It's respect. You've given our customers the most extraordinary night of music we've ever had. The room is still full, and it's an hour past when people usually start leaving. That's because of you." Eleanor looked out at the crowd, many of whom were watching her expectantly, waiting for her to return to playing. She took a deep breath and rose from the bench with new energy. "Well then," she said, the spark of performance returning to her eyes. "I should give them a proper finale, shouldn't I?" As she began to play again, this time a spirited rendition of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, Tom stepped back to watch in awe. In just a few hours, Eleanor Wilson had transformed from a homeless woman seeking shelter to a celebrated pianist reclaiming her rightful place at the keyboard. And somehow he sensed this was just the beginning of her story's new chapter. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, confusion clouded her mind as she tried to place herself in the soft, queen-sized bed with its crisp white sheets and fluffy pillows. The hotel room slowly came into focus. The tasteful landscape paintings on the walls, the small desk in the corner, the television she hadn't turned on. Her hands ached pleasantly, a familiar sensation from her younger years when she would practice for hours. She flexed her fingers carefully, working through the stiffness. Last night had been real then, not a dream. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Eleanor reached for her worn cardigan and pulled it over her nightgown before calling out, "Just a moment, please." She made her way slowly to the door, her hip protesting after yesterday's exertion. When she opened it, she found Angie from the piano room standing there with a rolling cart. "Good morning, Ms. Wilson," Angie said brightly. "Tom thought you might like breakfast in your room." I hope that's okay. Eleanor blinked in surprise. That's very thoughtful. Angie wheeled the cart inside. A full breakfast with eggs, toast, fruit, and a pot of Earl Grey tea. Tom also asked me to tell you that he's arranged for a doctor to look at your hands later this morning, if that's all right with you, just to make sure you didn't strain anything last night. Eleanor sat down at the small table where Angie was arranging the breakfast. A doctor? That's not necessary. My hands have been arthritic for years. Tom was very insistent, Angie said with a smile. He said to tell you it's standard procedure for all their musicians. Eleanor knew that wasn't true, but she appreciated the gesture and the way it preserved her dignity. In that case, I accept. As Eleanor poured her tea, Angie hesitated by the door. Ms. Wilson, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you were incredible last night. I've worked at the piano room for 3 years, and I've never heard anything like it. Eleanor added a slice of lemon to her tea. Thank you, dear. Also, Angie pulled out her phone. I thought you might want to see this. She handed Eleanor the phone open to a social media page. A video was playing. Eleanor at the piano, her hands moving across the keys as she played Chopin. The view count showed over 100,000, and comments scrolled by too quickly to read. This was posted just last night, Angie explained. It's gone viral. People are sharing it everywhere. Eleanor stared at the screen, watching herself play. The angle captured her face in profile, lost in the music, transformed from a homeless elderly woman to something timeless, a vessel for the music itself. I don't understand, Eleanor said softly. Why would so many people care about an old woman playing the piano? Angie sat down across from her. Because it's beautiful, and because your story touches people. Someone posted about how you came in from the cold, about your background. People are inspired. Eleanor handed the phone back, uncomfortable with the attention. I just played the piano. I've been doing it for 90 years. And that's exactly why it matters, Angie said. Look, I should let you eat your breakfast before it gets cold. Tom will be by around 11 to take you to the doctor, and then back to the piano room. We're completely booked tonight. People calling specifically to hear you play. After Angie left, Eleanor ate slowly, savoring real food served on proper china. How quickly life could change. Yesterday morning, she had woken on a thin mattress at the women's shelter, wondering if she would find enough coins in her purse for a cup of coffee. The doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Chen, examined Eleanor's hands with gentle care later that morning. She recommended specific exercises, a paraffin treatment, and anti-inflammatory medication that would help with the arthritis pain without causing drowsiness that might affect her playing. You have remarkable dexterity despite the arthritis, Dr. Chen noted. Most people with joints in this condition wouldn't be able to play as you do. The music helps me forget the pain, Eleanor said simply. By the time Eleanor returned to the piano room that afternoon for a brief rehearsal, she found the place transformed. A banner hung above the entrance, featuring Eleanor Wilson, classical pianist. Inside, a photographer was setting up near the piano, and a local news crew was speaking with Tom. Ah, there she is, Tom exclaimed when he saw her. He hurried over, excitement written across his face. Ms. Wilson, is it all right if Channel 7 does a short interview with you before tonight's performance? Your story is causing quite a stir. Eleanor clutched her purse tighter. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm not looking for attention, just a chance to play. Tom nodded understandingly. Of course. No pressure. But there's something else you should know. He guided her to a quiet corner. That gentleman from last night, Patrick Donovan, he called this morning. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra is interested in having you as a special guest performer at their charity gala next month. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. The symphony? But that's a big deal. Tom finished for her. Yes, it is. And well-deserved. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. It was too much, too fast. Just yesterday she had been invisible, one of the forgotten people that others' eyes slid past on the street. Now suddenly she was visible again. The weight of all those eyes felt overwhelming. I need to sit down, she whispered. Tom quickly pulled out a chair for her and brought her a glass of water. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. Eleanor took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. It's not your fault. It's just, I've been nobody for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to be somebody. Tom crouched beside her chair, his young face serious. Ms. Wilson, with all due respect, you've always been somebody. The world just wasn't paying attention. A reporter approached them, microphone in hand, but Tom waved her away with a firm shake of his head. Not now, he mouthed. Eleanor took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. I should practice. If people are coming specifically to hear me play, I don't want to disappoint them. Tom helped her to the piano, where she spent the next hour running through pieces, testing which ones her hands could manage for an extended performance. The staff moved quietly around her, setting up for the evening, occasionally pausing in their work to listen. As evening approached, Eleanor retreated to a small back room that Tom had set up as a makeshift dressing room. She had declined his offer to buy her new clothes, insisting on wearing what she had. The music is what matters, she had told him firmly. Not what I'm wearing. But she did allow Angie to help tidy her hair and add a touch of color to her pale cheeks. Looking in the mirror, Eleanor barely recognized herself. The hollow-eyed woman from the shelter had been replaced by someone with a spark of life in her gaze. There's a full house out there, Angie said, as she put the finishing touches on Eleanor's hair, standing room only. And guess what? The director of the Chicago Institute of Music is here. And a reporter from the Tribune. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. I haven't played for a crowd like this in over 70 years. Are you nervous? Eleanor considered the question. No, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. When I play, everything else falls away. It's just me and the music. It always has been. At 8 o'clock, Tom escorted Eleanor to the piano. The room was packed, with people standing along the walls and crowded around the bar. A hush fell as she made her way slowly across the floor, all eyes following her progress. Camera flashes popped here and there, despite Tom's request for no photography. As Eleanor settled onto the piano bench, adjusting her position with care, she looked out at the sea of expectant faces. So different from last night when she had begun playing for an indifferent room. Now they were waiting, anticipating, expecting something transcendent. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if last night had been a fluke? What if her hands, unpracticed for so long, failed her tonight? Then her eyes fell on a familiar face in the front row, an elderly woman from the shelter where Eleanor had been staying. Beside her sat two other shelter residents, looking uncomfortable in the upscale setting but determined to be there. The shelter director must have brought them. Eleanor nodded slightly to them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared circumstances. Then she turned to the piano, placed her gnarled hands on the keys, and began to play. She started with Bach, the structured perfection of his mathematics flowing through her fingers. She had played these pieces so many times over the decades that they lived in her muscle memory, in the very marrow of her bones. As she played, her body remembered its purpose, not just a vessel for breathing and eating and sleeping, but a conduit for beauty. The audience sat spellbound as Bach gave way to Mozart, then Beethoven, then Chopin. Eleanor played without sheet music, drawing on a lifetime's repertoire stored in her heart. When she reached Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, the piece she had played for her Juilliard audition nearly 80 years ago, tears slipped unnoticed down her weathered cheeks. In that moment, Eleanor Wilson was not homeless, not elderly, not forgotten. She was, as she had always been in her deepest self, a musician. And for the first time in decades, the world was listening. A week passed like a dream. Eleanor played at the piano room every night to packed houses. People traveled from neighboring states just to hear her. The videos of her performances gathered millions of views online, with comments in dozens of languages. Local news stations ran features on the piano grandma, as some had taken to calling her, though Eleanor herself disliked the nickname. I'm a pianist, not a curiosity, she told Tom one afternoon as they reviewed the music for that evening's performance. Tom nodded. I know. We'll make sure everyone else knows it too. Eleanor's fingers moved silently across the tabletop, practicing a difficult passage from Liszt. I've been thinking about the symphony orchestra's invitation, and... Tom looked up hopefully. The invitation had grown from a one-night charity performance to a proposed 3-night special engagement. I'll do it, Eleanor said, her voice firm. But I have conditions. Tom pulled out a notepad. Name them. First, I want tickets set aside each night for residents of the women's shelter. They should have good seats, not stuck in the back. Tom wrote it down, smiling. Done. Second, I want a portion of the proceeds to go to music education for underprivileged children." Eleanor's eyes grew distant. So many talented young people never get the chances I had. "I'm sure that can be arranged. And third," Eleanor continued, her voice softening, "I need a place to live. Not charity," she added quickly. "I'll pay rent from whatever they're offering me, but I can't keep staying in hotels, and I won't go back to the shelter now that I have means to support myself." Tom set down his pen. "Actually, I might have a solution for that already. The owner of the piano room, Mrs. Henley, has an apartment above the venue. It's small but nice. She used to live there herself before moving to the suburbs. When I told her about you, she offered it immediately." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Above the piano bar? I could hear the music every night. Is that a problem?" A smile spread across Eleanor's face. "It's perfect." Later that afternoon, Tom showed Eleanor the apartment. It was indeed small. Just a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and living area. But to Eleanor, who had been sleeping on shelter cots for years, it seemed like a palace. Large windows let in plenty of natural light, and she could hear faint piano notes drifting up from below, where the afternoon pianist was practicing. "Mrs. Henley left some of the furniture," Tom explained, showing her around, "and we can help you get anything else you need." Eleanor ran her hand over a bookshelf. "It's more than enough." As they were leaving, Eleanor paused by the door. "How much is the rent?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Henley insists on letting you stay for free." Eleanor shook her head firmly. "No, I'll pay something, even if it's just a token amount." "She thought you might say that," Tom admitted. "She suggested perhaps you could give piano lessons to her granddaughter in exchange. The girl is 12 and showing some talent but loses interest quickly." Eleanor considered this. "Yes, that would be fair. I can teach again." That evening's performance felt different to Eleanor, playing with the knowledge that she had a home to return to. A real home with her own key and her own space gave her music a new quality, a sense of being grounded, of looking forward rather than back. When she finished her final piece, a Schubert impromptu that left the audience breathless, a tall, distinguished woman approached the piano. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant knot, and she carried herself with the posture of someone who had spent decades in the presence of fine music. "Ms. Wilson," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Reed, director of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Your playing is extraordinary." Eleanor accepted the handshake. "Thank you. I'd like to discuss the details of your appearance with us next month. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow." "Yes, that would be fine. I'm staying in the apartment upstairs now." Victoria smiled. "Wonderful. I'll come by around 11 if that suits you." After the director left, Eleanor found herself surrounded by admirers. She signed programs and accepted compliments with growing ease, though she still felt somewhat bewildered by all the attention. Among the crowd was a young journalism student who hung back until most others had gone. When she finally approached Eleanor, her manner was less gushing than the others had been. "Ms. Wilson," she began, "I'm Penny Clark from the university paper. I was wondering if I might interview you for a feature I'm writing on late-in-life success stories." Eleanor winced at the phrasing. "Is that what I am? A late-in-life success story?" Penny flushed. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. What I meant was, your journey is inspiring, from Juilliard to homelessness to this remarkable second act. There's so much wisdom there, so much that younger generations could learn from." Eleanor studied the young woman's earnest face. "All right. But not tonight. I'm tired and my hands need rest. Of course. Tomorrow? I have a meeting at 11. Come at 2. The next morning, Eleanor woke in her new apartment to sunlight streaming through windows that were now hers. She made tea in her own kitchenette and sat by the window, watching the city come to life below. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to think about the future. Victoria Reed arrived precisely at 11, bringing with her contract papers and a recording of the orchestra performing the pieces they hoped Eleanor might play with them. "We were thinking Beethoven's Emperor Concerto," Victoria explained. "But of course, we're open to your suggestions." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "The Emperor would be lovely, though it's quite demanding." "Too demanding?" Victoria asked carefully. Eleanor flexed her fingers. "Dr. Chen has me on a new medication that's helping with the inflammation, and I've been doing her recommended exercises faithfully. I believe I can manage it with proper rehearsal time." Victoria looked relieved. Excellent. We've scheduled 4 rehearsals with the full orchestra before the performances. As they discussed details, Eleanor felt a strange sensation. The reawakening of professional pride, of being treated as a peer by another musician, rather than as an object of charity or curiosity. When Penny arrived for the interview at 2, Eleanor had changed into a simple blue dress that Tom had helped her purchase earlier in the week. Her white hair was neatly combed, and she wore a single piece of jewelry, a small pearl brooch that had been her mother's, one of the few possessions she had managed to keep through all her years of hardship. "Thank you for seeing me," Penny said, setting up a small recorder. "I'm not sure what wisdom I have to offer," Eleanor said, "but I'll try to answer your questions." Penny smiled. "Let's start at the beginning. What first drew you to the piano?" Eleanor closed her eyes, remembering. "I was 4 years old. My father worked as a janitor at a music school in New York. Sometimes he would take me with him when he cleaned in the evenings. There was an old upright piano in one of the practice rooms. I would press the keys while he mopped the floors, fascinated by how each one made a different sound. And someone recognized your talent? One of the teachers found me there one night and asked my father if she could give me lessons. We couldn't afford to pay, but she taught me anyway, twice a week after school. By the time I was 8, she was telling my parents I needed a better teacher than she could be." As the interview continued, Eleanor found herself sharing stories she hadn't thought about in decades. Her first recital at age 10, the scholarship to the preparatory program at Juilliard, the teachers who had shaped her development as an artist. "You performed at Carnegie Hall?" Penny prompted. "Yes, 3 times before I was 25. Eleanor smiled at the memory. "The New York Times called me a rising star with uncommon sensitivity and technical brilliance. And then you met your husband and left the concert stage." Eleanor nodded. "Harold didn't ask me to give up my career. That was my choice. His mother needed care and we couldn't afford to hire anyone. Then the children came one after another. Do you regret it? The path not taken?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I regret some things. I wonder sometimes what might have been. But regret Harold? Our children? The lives we touched through teaching? I see you taught piano for many years." "Yes, from our home in Chicago. Some of my students went on to have wonderful musical careers themselves. Teaching is its own art form. And now you're returning to the stage at 96. How does that feel?" Eleanor looked down at her hands, the enlarged knuckles and prominent veins. "Like coming home to a place I thought I'd never see again." After the interview, Eleanor rested for a while, her energy still not what it once had been. In the evening, she went downstairs to the piano room. Not to perform, Tom had insisted she take one night off, but to listen to a young jazz pianist who was playing instead. She sat at a small table near the back, sipping tea and letting the music wash over her. Several patrons recognized her and came to pay their respects, but most left her in peace. As she listened to the young man's innovative interpretations of jazz standards, Eleanor felt a connection across time to all the musicians who had come before and all who would follow. Music was the thread that wove through everything, binding past to present to future. Tomorrow she would begin preparations for her symphony appearance. She would meet Mrs. Henley's granddaughter and begin teaching again. She would answer more interview questions and adjust to her new status as a minor celebrity. But tonight, she was simply a woman listening to good music in a comfortable chair, with a home waiting for her upstairs when she was ready to return to it. After so many years of struggle, it was enough. More than enough, it was everything. The grand hall of the Chicago Symphony Center hummed with anticipation. Every seat was filled, from the orchestra level to the uppermost balcony. Programs rustled as people flipped through pages, reading Eleanor Wilson's remarkable story, from Juilliard prodigy to homeless grandmother to tonight's featured soloist. Backstage, Eleanor sat quietly in the green room, eyes closed, mentally rehearsing the Emperor Concerto. Her hands rested in her lap, occasionally moving in small, precise motions as she worked through a difficult passage. She wore a simple black dress that Victoria had helped her select, elegant but not flashy, allowing the music to remain the focus. A light knock at the door interrupted her concentration. "5 minutes, Miss Wilson," called the stage manager. Eleanor opened her eyes and took a deep breath. "Thank you." Tom poked his head in. "May I come in?" Eleanor nodded, and he entered carrying a small bouquet of white roses. These are from everyone at the piano room. We're all so proud of you." Eleanor accepted the flowers with a smile. "Thank you. Is Mrs. Henley here?" "Front row center with her granddaughter Daisy." Tom grinned. "Daisy's been practicing an hour every day since her first lesson with you." "That's a miracle, according to her grandmother. She has natural talent," Eleanor said. "And a good ear. She just needed to find the joy in it." Victoria appeared at the door, resplendent in her conductor's black suit. "It's time, Eleanor." Eleanor rose slowly, steadying herself. At 96, her body remained her greatest limitation, though her mind and hands were as sharp as ever. "I'm ready," she said. Tom gave her arm a gentle squeeze. "Knock 'em dead." As Eleanor made her way to the stage entrance, she passed a row of framed photographs, past conductors and featured performers of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. She paused briefly, taking in the august company she was about to join. The stage manager offered his arm. "Careful on the steps, Ms. Wilson." The audience erupted into applause as Eleanor emerged onto the stage. She walked slowly but steadily to the grand piano at center stage, acknowledging the applause with a dignified nod. In the front row, she spotted Mrs. Henley and young Daisy, alongside several women from the shelter, dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. Eleanor gave them a special smile before seating herself at the piano. Victoria took the podium and a hush fell over the hall. She raised her baton, made eye contact with Eleanor, and with a fluid motion brought the orchestra to life. The majestic opening of Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5 filled the space. Eleanor listened, counting measures, feeling the music build around her. Then at precisely the right moment, her hands descended onto the keys, and she was no longer a 96-year-old woman with arthritis and a history of hardship. She was simply music itself. The performance flowed like a river, powerful, graceful, unstoppable. The connection between Eleanor and the orchestra was palpable, each responding to the other in perfect harmony. When they reached the lyrical second movement, tears could be seen on the faces of many audience members. The beauty of it was almost painful, like glimpsing something so perfect it couldn't possibly belong to this world. In the final movement, Eleanor's hands moved with astonishing agility, defying the limitations of age and arthritis. The triumphant conclusion brought the audience to their feet before the final note had even faded away. The standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes, with waves of applause washing over Eleanor as she stood beside Victoria, holding the conductor's hand for support. Backstage, after numerous curtain calls, Eleanor sank gratefully into a chair, her energy finally flagging. "I'll need to rest before tomorrow night's performance," she told Victoria. "Of course. The car is waiting whenever you're ready." Eleanor nodded, then noticed a young woman hovering nervously nearby. "Yes?" she called to her. The woman approached timidly. "Ms. Wilson, I'm Gabriela Lopez. I'm a student at the Chicago Conservatory." "Nice to meet you, Gabriela. Your performance was—" Gabriela struggled for words. "I've never heard anything like it. I play piano too, and I was wondering, would you consider taking on another student?" Eleanor studied the young woman's face, the passion and hope written there. "I already have one student. Taking on another would be a significant commitment at my age." Gabriela's face fell. "I understand. However," Eleanor continued, "I could hear you play sometime. Perhaps give you some occasional guidance." The young woman's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be amazing," Eleanor smiled. "Come to the piano room next Tuesday afternoon. Bring something challenging that you're working on." As Gabriela thanked her profusely and departed, Tom approached with Eleanor's coat. "Adding to your student roster already?" "Just offering a bit of advice," Eleanor said. "Though she reminds me of myself at that age, hungry for knowledge, for mastery." "Speaking of the piano room," Tom said as he helped her into her coat, "I have some news. Mrs. Henley wants to rename it." "Oh? To what?" "Eleanor's, if that's okay with you." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "I'm not sure I deserve such an honor." "She thinks you do. We all do. You've transformed the place, given it a soul." Eleanor was silent for a moment, processing this. "I'll think about it." The car took Eleanor back to her apartment above the piano room. Tom helped her upstairs, made sure she had everything she needed for the night, then left her to rest. Eleanor changed into her nightgown and made a cup of tea, her post-performance ritual. As she sipped it slowly by the window, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 3 months ago, she had been sleeping on a cot at the women's shelter, her most valuable possession, the memory of music she could no longer play regularly. Now she had a home, students, a performance career reborn in her final years. The circle had somehow completed itself. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the telephone, a new addition to her life. She answered it cautiously, still not entirely comfortable with the technology. "Mom?" The voice was distant but unmistakable. "Mom, is that you?" Eleanor's hand tightened on the receiver. "Lily? Yes, it's me. I saw you on the news, playing with the orchestra." Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes. "Lily, sweetheart. How are you?" "I'm doing better. New medication. I've been stable for almost a year now." "That's wonderful news. The doctors say I might be able to live independently soon, with supervision." Lily's voice was hesitant, as if afraid to hope too much. "I was thinking maybe I could come see you, if that's okay." "Of course it's okay," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "I would love that more than anything." They talked for nearly an hour, carefully at first, then with growing ease as they began to rebuild the connection that mental illness had strained over the years. When they finally said goodbye with promises to speak again soon, Eleanor sat for a long time with the phone in her lap, overwhelmed by the unexpected gift of this reconnection. The next morning, a package arrived from Australia, a handwritten letter from her oldest daughter, along with family photos and drawings from grandchildren and great-grandchildren she had never met. Word of her performances had reached even there, awakening family ties long dormant. As Eleanor prepared for her second symphony performance, she felt a sense of completion. Music had been the constant in her life, through triumph and loss, through homelessness, and now this unexpected renaissance. It had sustained her when nothing else remained, and now it had brought her full circle, restoring what time and circumstance had taken away. That evening, as she walked onto the stage to another standing ovation, Eleanor felt lighter, as if some long-carried burden had been set down at last. The weight of regret, of what might have been, had lifted. In its place was simple gratitude for this final chapter, unexpected, unplanned, yet somehow perfect in its design. When she placed her hands on the keys and began to play, the music flowed through her with even greater depth than before. Each note carried the fullness of her life, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and failures, the long empty years and this glorious present moment. 6 months later, the piano room officially became Eleanor's. The new sign was unveiled during a special ceremony attended by musicians, critics, and many of Eleanor's former shelter companions, several of whom now had homes of their own. Inspired by her example, Eleanor herself played that night, of course. At 97, her health was stable, her mind sharp, her fingers still capable of creating magic at the keyboard. She had 3 regular students now, including Daisy and Gabriella, and a waiting list of others hoping for even occasional guidance from the legendary pianist. Once a month, she performed at the women's shelter, bringing music to those still struggling as she once had. "Never forget where you came from," she often told her students, "and never assume you know where you're going." Lily had moved to Chicago, into a supervised apartment just a few blocks away. They had dinner together every Sunday, rebuilding their relationship one conversation at a time. Eleanor's Australian daughter was planning a visit for Christmas, bringing family members eager to meet the matriarch they knew only through stories and now viral videos. Eleanor's life had expanded in ways she could never have imagined that cold night when she first stepped into the piano room, drawn by the sight of a piano she never expected to play. The journey from that moment to this one had been improbable, miraculous even, a testament to the enduring power of art and the human capacity for renewal at any age. Every night before bed, Eleanor still played for herself, sometimes Chopin, sometimes Bach, sometimes simple melodies from her childhood. The music remained her constant companion, her solace, her joy. She had come home to it at last, and in doing so had found her way home to herself.